The sun over Arizona burned white that afternoon, flattening every color into shades of dust and gold. A lone rider, Jacob Hale, followed the old trail toward Copper Creek town. His horse, a chestnut mare named Ruby, snorted beneath the weight of heat and miles. Jacob's hat brim was pulled low, his coat worn thin at the elbows. He'd spent weeks driving cattle east for a rancher who barely paid him enough to eat. All he wanted now was a drink, a warm meal, and a few hours without the sound of hoofbeats in his ears. But as he rode down the main street, something stopped him. Near the trading post, a crowd had gathered. Laughter drifted in the air, ugly, jeering laughter. Jacob slowed Ruby to a halt and peered through the dust. There, tied to a wooden post beside a wagon, stood a young Apache woman. Her wrists were bound with iron shackles, and a thick rope circled her neck like a leash. She was barefoot, her dark hair tangled, her clothes little more than torn cloth. Yet even through the dirt and bruises, she held her chin high. Savage caught up north, the trader barked, strong as a wildcat. Who'll give me $50? Jacob's stomach turned. He had seen many cruel things in the territories, lynchings, raids, and wars fought for greed, but this was something different. The girl's eyes found his, and in that instant, the world fell quiet. There was no defiance in her gaze, only a deep, wordless plea, one that cut straight through his hardened heart. The crowd shouted offers. She'll fetch a fine price. Tame her and she'll work your fields. A rancher laughed. I'd keep her to scare off coyotes. Jacob dismounted slowly. What's her name? He asked the trader. Who cares? The man spat. She don't speak English proper. Calls herself Aiyana something. Aiyana, maybe. Wild blood. You interested or just wasting my time, cowboy? Jacob looked at the girl again. Her lips trembled, but she didn't look away. He took a step closer, then another, ignoring the smell of sweat, fear, and dust. The trader noticed his hesitation and grinned. For you, friend, $45. Jacob's hand tightened on the coins in his pocket. He barely had 20. He crouched beside the girl, his voice low so the others couldn't hear. You understand me? He asked. She nodded faintly. Her voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. You, good man. The words struck him harder than a bullet. I try to be, he said softly. She swallowed hard. Please, by me, she whispered, eyes glistening. Make me wife, not slave. Jacob froze. He knew the weight of those words. He knew the law too. There was no law for people like her. She wasn't property, yet she was being sold like cattle. If he walked away, she'd be taken by someone far worse. If he stayed, he'd risk his job, maybe even his life. But looking into her eyes, he felt a choice forming inside him, quiet but certain. He stood. I'll take her. The crowd snickered. The trader frowned. You got the money. Jacob reached into his pocket and threw his last silver coins into the man's hand. That's 23. The rest you'll get when I come back from the bank. The trader sneered. You think I'm a fool? Jacob's hand drifted to the revolver at his hip. No, he said calmly. I think you're a man who wants to stay alive long enough to count that money. The laughter stopped. Dust hung still in the air. The trader stared at him for a long moment, then spat on the ground. Fine, take her, but don't come crying when she cuts your throat in your sleep. Jacob ignored the man's words. He stepped forward, drew his knife, and cut the rope around Aiyana's neck. She flinched when he reached for her wrists, and he slowed his movements. Easy, he said gently. The chains were rusted, biting deep into her skin. He pried them open, one link at a time, until they clattered to the dirt. For the first time, her arms were free. She looked at him as if she couldn't believe it. Her lips parted, but no sound came. He offered his hand. Come on, you're safe now. Cautiously, she placed her palm in his. Her hand was small, trembling, but warm. He led her to Ruby, lifted her carefully into the saddle, and swung up behind her. The crowd watched in silence as they rode out of Copper Creek, two figures disappearing into the burning horizon. Dash dash dash. They rode for hours without speaking. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was heavy, full of everything that couldn't be said. The sun dipped low, painting the mesas red and gold. When they finally stopped near a riverbed, Jacob dismounted and built a small fire. Aiyana sat a few feet away, her knees pulled close, eyes darting from shadow to shadow. He cooked beans in a dented tin pot and slid the bowl toward her. She hesitated, then took it with both hands. She ate slowly, carefully, as if afraid the food might vanish if she moved too quickly. "You got family?" Jacob asked quietly. She paused, eyes downcast. "All gone. Soldiers. Burned our village." Her voice broke on the last word. "I run. They catch me." Jacob stared at the flames. He'd fought in that same war, once wearing the uniform of men who called it justice. He'd seen villages burn, heard women scream. The memory made him sick. "I'm sorry," he said simply. She looked at him then. Not with anger, but with curiosity. "You not same as them?" He shook his head. "No, not anymore." Aiyana's shoulders eased a little. She looked up at the stars, her voice soft. "You save me." "Why?" Jacob didn't answer right away. He poked the fire, watching the sparks climb into the night. "Because I couldn't stand to see another person in chains." For a moment, neither spoke. The wind rustled the sagebrush, and an owl hooted from the canyon wall. She finally whispered, "I will not run." He smiled faintly. "I didn't think you would." When the fire burned low, she lay down near the edge of the camp, still cautious, still half expecting cruelty. Jacob wrapped himself in his blanket, back turned to her, giving her space. Before sleep took him, he heard her murmur something in Apache, soft, melodic, like a prayer. The desert night held its breath. By dawn, the world smelled of dust and freedom. Jacob saddled Ruby while Aiyana watched silently. The chains she had worn now lay buried beneath a pile of stones by the riverbank. "Where we go?" she asked. He glanced toward the rising sun. "Home," he said. "My ranch isn't much, but it's yours too, if you want." She looked at him a long time, then nodded slowly. "I want." As they rode out together, the desert stretched endless before them, a land of pain and promise. Behind them, the town that once laughed at her chains faded into the haze, forgotten. Ahead waited something neither of them understood yet, but both were ready to face. The first morning on Jacob's ranch broke with the cry of a hawk circling above the cottonwoods. His land stretched across the valley, fences half fallen, the barn leaning like an old man's back, and dust clinging to every surface. It wasn't much, but it was quiet, far from the greed and cruelty of Copper Creek. Aiyana stood at the edge of the corral, staring at the open sky as if testing her freedom. The wind played with her hair. She wore one of Jacob's old shirts, sleeves rolled to her elbows. The fabric swallowed her, but she didn't seem to care. Jacob watched from the porch, sipping coffee. He didn't know what to say to her. She was free now, truly free, but she hadn't spoken much since they left town. Part of him wondered if she still thought of him as another captor. "You can walk wherever you please," he said at last. "No one's gonna stop you." She turned, her eyes soft but uncertain. "You not want me go?" He hesitated. "If you go, I won't stop you. But I'd be sad to see you leave." For a moment, she said nothing. Then, almost shyly, she replied, "Then, I stay." That small sentence carried more warmth than the sunrise. They fell into a rhythm. Jacob worked the fields, fixing fences, feeding the horses. Aiyana helped where she could, collecting eggs, sweeping dust from the porch, even trying her hand at milking the stubborn old cow. She didn't speak much English, but she learned quickly. When Jacob tried teaching her words, sky, river, home, she'd repeat them softly, smiling as she pointed. Once, when he handed her a bucket, she said proudly, "Water." He grinned. "You're catching on fast." She tilted her head, teasing, "You slow teacher." It was the first time he'd heard her joke, and the sound of her laughter filled the empty ranch like birds returning after a long winter. But not every day was easy. At night, she sometimes woke with a start, breathing hard, eyes wide with terror. Jacob would hear her through the thin walls of the cabin. He never entered her room, never even crossed the threshold, but he'd speak softly from the doorway until she calmed. "It's all right, Aiyana. You're safe. Nobody's coming." One night, after a storm, he found her sitting outside beneath the rain, head bowed. "You'll catch cold," he said, tossing his coat around her shoulders. She didn't move. "When thunder come," she whispered, "I remember fire." Soldiers. My people running. Jacob knelt beside her, unsure what comfort words could offer. You don't have to talk about it, he said. But she did. In broken English and long silences, she told him about the raid, the burning huts, the soldiers, rifles, the screams that followed. Jacob listened, feeling the weight of every word. He couldn't erase her pain, but he could share the silence that followed it. When she finished, she turned to him and asked quietly, "Why you help me?" He stared into the storm-dark horizon. "Because I used to wear that uniform," he admitted. "And I hated the man I became." Aiyana looked at him then, really looked. The hatred she once carried toward all white men began to soften, not vanish, but shift into something more complicated. "You fight them?" she asked. "Not anymore," he said. "I fight for this." He gestured to the small patch of land, the tired barn, the horse grazing in the distance. "Peace, maybe." She studied him, then whispered, "You have good heart." Weeks passed. The world outside the ranch moved on without them. Dust storms came, traders passed along the river road, soldiers patrolled the borderlands, but in their little valley, time slowed. Jacob taught her how to ride a horse. The first time she mounted Ruby, she gripped the saddle horn tight, eyes wide. "She no like me," Aiyana muttered. "She will," Jacob said. "You just gotta talk to her." Aiyana frowned. "She not speak Apache." "Try anyway," Jacob smiled. She leaned forward and whispered to the horse in her native tongue. Ruby snorted, then began to move, slowly, carefully. Aiyana's laughter echoed down the valley, wild and free. Jacob rode beside her, watching. In that moment, she wasn't a prisoner, or a survivor, or even the girl he'd freed. She was simply alive, radiant and unbroken. One evening, as they watched the sunset from the porch, Aiyana turned to him and said, "You lonely before me?" Jacob thought for a moment. "Yeah," he said softly. "This place was quiet, but too quiet. I'd talk to the walls sometimes." She smiled faintly. "Now you talk too much." He chuckled. "You sure about staying here? You could go back west, maybe find your people." She looked out toward the hills where the sun bled into the earth. "My people gone," she said simply. Then, turning to him, she added, "But you give me new life." "That is enough." The words settled between them like a promise neither dared to name. One afternoon, men came, 3 ranchers from town. They rode up the trail, dust rising behind their horses. Jacob knew them. They were the same kind who'd laughed at the market weeks ago. "Well, I'll be damned," one called. "You still got that squaw livin' with you." Jacob stiffened. "She's got a name." The man sneered. "Don't matter. Folks say you married her." "That true?" Jacob's jaw tightened. "That's none of your concern." Aiyana had stepped onto the porch now, standing behind him. The men's eyes flicked to her, full of mockery. "Careful, cowboy," another said. "You mix blood, you'll get yourself run out of town." Jacob's hand hovered near his gun belt. "You finished," he said evenly. The men exchanged glances. One spat in the dirt. "We'll see how long that piece of yours lasts." They turned and rode off, laughter trailing behind them. When they were gone, Jacob turned to Aiyana. "You okay?" She nodded slowly. "They fear what they not understand," she said. "We both know that." He nodded, ashamed of the world she had to face. "You don't deserve any of this." She smiled, gentle but fierce. "I deserve to live, and I do now." Months later, spring returned to the desert. Wildflowers colored the dry hillsides, and the air smelled of rain and new life. Aiyana had planted a small garden behind the cabin. Corn, beans, herbs she remembered from her childhood. She hummed as she worked, her song blending with the sound of wind. Jacob watched her from the porch, his heart full in a way he hadn't known possible. She caught his gaze and walked up to him, dirt on her hands, a smile on her lips. "You stare too much," she teased. He laughed. "Can't help it." She looked at him for a long moment, then said softly, "You keep promise." "What promise?" "You said I be free. But still, I stay. Because I choose it." Jacob felt the lump in his throat. "Then I'm the lucky one." Aiyana stepped closer, eyes shimmering in the sunset. "No," she whispered, "we both lucky." And there, beneath the vast western sky, the ghosts of their pasts began to